So apparently the Canadian federal government is open to a new law to fight fake news about the My Sharona Cyrus online.
What could possibly go wrong with that?
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and we have officially, as of today, entered week 6 of the lockdown. We are doing as well as can be expected, being under effective house arrest 24/7 with 3 kids, 2 dogs over the last 6 weeks. We're doing okay. I hope everyone else is doing pretty well out there, all things considered. Stay safe and stay healthy, but let's get into this vlog. A lot of people have been messaging me, DMing me, putting comments in the comment section that I have to look into Canada's efforts to create new laws to combat online disinformation about the My Sharona Cyrus. Whenever I hear lawmakers talking about creating new laws to battle new risks, my first reaction, and it should be everyone else's first reaction out there, is do we not already have appropriate laws to deal with this risk? And that was yet again my first reaction when I heard that Canadian lawmakers were talking about creating new laws to combat online misinformation. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, so let's just go through an article on the subject, and bear in mind there is no draft legislation to go over. Right now it is just an idea that is being floated around the federal government. Federal government open to new law to fight pandemic misinformation. It's one of several measures the government is considering to counter fake news about the virus online. Elizabeth Thompson, CBC News. CBC News, that sounds oddly familiar. Oh yeah, didn't they just run a front page story on Andrew Scheer boarding a packed flight to Ottawa despite social distancing guidelines? That packed flight being a 9-seat government jet and 7 of the 9 people on that plane being Andrew Scheer, his wife, and 5 kids? Oh yeah, that's CBC. Let's hear what they have to say about the government creating new laws to fight misinformation online. The federal government is considering introducing legislation to make it an offense to knowingly spread misinformation that could harm people, says Privy Council President Dominic LeBlanc. LeBlanc told CBC News he is interested in British MP Damien Collins' call for laws to punish those responsible for spreading dangerous misinformation online about the My Sharona Cyrus. LeBlanc said he has discussed the matter already with other cabinet ministers, including Justice Minister David Lametti. If the government decides to follow through, he said it could take a while to draft legislation. Extraordinary times require extraordinary measures, and it is about protecting the public, he said. Doesn't it always seem that the wholesale forfeiture of fundamental civil liberties is always about protecting the public?
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Call me a cynic, but it seems that the government is always about taking away your rights for your own protection. And when I read about the federal government contemplating the creation of new laws to protect the general public from the dangerous spread of misinformation, I ask myself if we don't already have something in the criminal code which has 850 some odd articles that already protects against that. I don't specialize in criminal law, but I think I can easily and quickly come up with at least 3 articles in the criminal code that already outlaws such conduct. Criminal negligence. Section 219. Everyone is criminally negligent who, in doing anything or in omitting to do anything that it is his duty to do, shows wanton or reckless disregard for the lives or safety of other persons. Fraudulent misrepresentations. Section 380. Everyone who, by deceit, falsehood, or other fraudulent means, whether or not it is a false pretense within the meaning of this act, defrauds the public or any person, whether ascertained or not, of any property, money, or valuable security, or any service. How might criminal fraud respond to some of the concerns of the federal government who are currently contemplating new laws? Collins, who chaired an international committee on big data, privacy, and democracy in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, said at the outset of the pandemic that much of the misinformation and disinformation in circulation was promoting fake cures for the My Sharona Cyrus or offering tips on how to avoid catching it. It seems to me that if the concern is people spreading disinformation or misinformation in order to sell fake cures, that the existing criminal act of fraud would probably protect against that. Alright, those are the only 2 I can come up with offhand, but I am sure that someone who specializes in criminal law could easily come up with a few more provisions that might protect against the concerns of the federal government. Let's get back to the article. Opposition leader Andrew Scheer criticized the idea of using legislation to curb misinformation. We're concerned when this government starts talking about free speech issues, Scheer told reporters at a news conference Thursday. They've got a terrible history over the past few years of proposing ideas that would infringe upon free speech. Anytime this government starts talking about regulating what people can say and not say, we start off the conversation with a great deal of healthy skepticism, Scheer added, pointing out that the government has changed its pandemic messaging on travel restrictions and the use of masks. The comments come as governments around the world struggle to curb dangerous misinformation and disinformation circulating about the My Sharona Cyrus. Collins is calling for legislation to combat online disinformation, perhaps modeled on Germany's laws governing online hate speech or France's legislation countering disinformation during election campaigns. It's such a serious public emergency that I think for someone to knowingly, willingly, and at scale and maliciously spread this content should be an offense, he said. And equally for tech companies, if it is highlighted to them that someone is doing this and they don't act against them doing it, then it should be an offense for them to have failed to act. They would have failed in their duty of care. So the contemplated criminal prohibition would not relate only only to spreading disinformation and misinformation online, it would also hold tech companies liable if they don't remove it from their platforms? This literally sounds like nothing other than George Orwell's Ministry of Truth. And incidentally, it's not the first time I've done a video on the physical embodiment of the proverbial Ministry of Truth. When YouTube was talking about prioritizing fact checkers and authoritative news, I did a video on that. I think I actually called it the Ministry of Truth. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to link it right here. Give it a watch. So YouTube has announced its intention to roll out what it refers to as a truth panel on search results indicating fake news, hoaxes, or false information. This sounds an awful lot like George Orwell's Ministry of Truth from 1984. I just watched a video by a fellow lawyer YouTuber named Ian Corzine, who has a channel called Heart of the Matter. Check it out if you've never checked it out. It's a great channel. He did a piece today analyzing what YouTube is referring to as a truth panel, verification system for search results to combat fake news, false information, etc., etc. One does not need to be a fortune teller or a prophet in order to know what can possibly go wrong with Ministries of Truth. Is it Ministry of Truths or Ministries of Truth? No, it's Ministries of Truth. Opportunistic cyber threat actors are attempting to take advantage of Canada's heightened levels of concern and legitimate fears around the Misinformation, said CSE spokesperson Ryan Foreman. They are trying to spread misinformation and scam Canadians out of their money or private data. Well, I am fairly certain that existing criminal laws already prohibit such conduct, such that new legislation would only be redundant, and redundant laws don't do anything good. I think it would be reasonable to enact with the RCMP, with our security officials and some public officials, a team to monitor disinformation and have the power to shut it down so it does not interfere with the efforts of our frontline medical workers, said Angus. Shutting down misinformation and disinformation. And the question I'm asking myself now is, who determines what is misinformation and disinformation? Would our government consider it to be misinformation or disinformation to make a public statement to the effect that there is no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the Misinformation? Would our government consider it misinformation or disinformation to publicly assert that the wearing of face masks is in fact no protection against the Misinformation? Because I've got to tell you, if so, our government might very well be talking about shutting down the WHO and holding them responsible. Because some of you might actually be unaware of the fact that these two statements are in fact statements that came out of the World Health Organization, the WHO themselves. Admittedly, the WHO asserted that the Chinese authorities found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission on January 14th, 2020 in the early stages of the outbreak. There is no doubt that if that statement were asserted today, it would be considered disinformation or misinformation. And therein lies the fundamental problem of fact-checking at large, let alone trying to criminalize conduct based on what is accepted as fact on a given date. Information today can be misinformation in a mere 3 months, and misinformation today can be truth in another 3 months. And the idea that the government would empower itself with fact-checking authority and criminalize conduct based on its own fact-checking, you don't need to be a lawyer, you don't need to be a jurist, you don't need to be a judge to know why that is potentially dangerous. Now, proponents of such legislation might say, Viva, don't worry, you're overreacting. It only criminalizes the offense of knowingly spreading misinformation.
Knowingly.
In other words, we are going to criminalize something based on the perceived state of mind of the person uttering the statement. And why might this be problematic? Well, in life, when it comes to love and politics, you will notice how we tend to find the benefit of the doubt in the perceived intentions of the people we like, and we don't find the benefit of the doubt in the perceived intentions of the people we don't like. So those who enforce the law can take the exact same statement uttered by two different parties, and depending on how they feel about those parties, impose the exact opposite sentence. I can virtually guarantee you that had certain public figures whose names can no longer be spoken on social media made the exact same statement as the WHO made on January 14th, the authorities enforcing any such law to the extent that they exist might not have presumed their good intentions and probably would have assumed that they knowingly were spreading misinformation. When it comes to assessing the actions of our political friends, we will give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, they were just acting on the best information they had at the time. Proponents of this type of legislation will probably cite that Arizona couple who drank fish tank cleaner because they thought it had the active ingredient that was being touted as an effective remedy to the Misinformation. Look at the potential disastrous effects of misinformation. This couple drank fish tank cleaner because they thought it had the active ingredient to fight the virus. To which I might respond that there have been cases of people who have died giving themselves liposuction. No legislation can protect someone from themselves, and no legislation can impose common sense. But the bottom line is that it is a fine line between information and misinformation, and oftentimes it is entirely subjective and political. More important than that, and it's something I said repeatedly in previous vlogs, one does not combat misinformation by criminalizing freedom of speech. As counterintuitive as it may sound, by criminalizing speech, one in fact sort of legitimizes that speech, or at least gives it more credence in the eyes of those who would be inclined to believe it in the first place. The only remedy to the inherent dangers of free speech is more free speech. It's an amazing phenomenon, but typically the unfettered access to freedom of speech allows the truth to rise to the top. There will nonetheless always be people who are going to drink fish tank cleaner, who are going to try to suck out their stomach fat with a vacuum cleaner in their basement, but no legislation can protect those people from themselves. On the contrary, the only thing that can protect those people from themselves is more free discussion so that they see how bad those ideas are. And that's all I have to say about that. If you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel, the support links are in the pinned comment below. Above all else, stay safe, stay sane, see how your friends and family are doing, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!